Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Tandorio TD201. This watch is available from tandoriowatch.com for $97 US, which is €92. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the piece. So the watch comes in a cardboard watch box, which is protected by this white cardboard outer sleeve. One removes the sleeve, and as you can see on the lid to the watch box we have the Tandorio emblem and Tandorio text logo. So one removes the lid, and inside there's a piece of foam which protects the watch in shipping, and the watch sits in the base inside a foam cutout panel on a piece of foam. So this does a good job of protecting the watch in shipping, and I think it's acceptable to use a cardboard watch box like this, bearing in mind it's a low tier price point piece at only €92. With regards to the items you get with the watch, you only get one item, which is this owner's instruction manual. Clear concise diagrams, the instructions are in English, and it details the operation of the movement used, which is the Seiko NH35A automatic. I would like to see Tandorio also include a plastic warranty card, because the watch is covered by a 2-year international warranty, and I want to give due credit to Tandorio here, because often low tier Chinese brands only cover their watches with 12 months of warranty. To get 2 years of international warranty is very good. So, with regards to the specifications of the piece, the Tandorio TD201 is clearly an homage to the Seiko SKX007, but this has smaller proportions. We have a 38mm case diameter, we have a lug-to-lug measurement of 41mm, a thickness of 13.4mm, and a lug width of 20mm. The silicone rubber strap has a textured waffle finish to the exterior, and it tapers 20mm at the lugs, tapering gradually down to the sterile buckle and tang. Solid 316L grade stainless steel buckle and tang, mirror polish to the top side, underside and flanks, correctly proportioned, and no sharp edges, no burrs. But however, it's a cost-cutting measure to have a sterile, unsigned buckle and tang. I would prefer to see Tandorio engrave it or emboss it with the Tandorio T emblem, or alternatively Tandorio text logo, because that would further enhance it. We have a flat sapphire crystal with clear AR coating on the underside, and the clear anti-reflective coating does an outstanding job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the flat sapphire crystal. Now, with regards to the dial layout, it is an homage to the Seiko SKX007, and it does have the same printed indices, but however, there's one thing missing from the dial, which Tandorio really need to add. There's no chapter ring. Now, if you look, they've used a stainless steel rehort, which is brushed satin finished, which is very aesthetically pleasing, and it's not a very deep rehort, which is often the case with low-tier Chinese brand pieces using the NH35A. But however, it really needs a chapter ring with white minute ticks, because one can't register the second hand or alternatively the minute hand with minute marks. There are no minute marks on the dial, we simply have the printed indices for the hours, and it really does look absent. So bearing in mind this is an homage to the SKX007, it really should have a chapter ring with white minute ticks versus a stainless steel rehort. So the dial is very well executed other than that, because the quality of the printing is good. The Tandorio T emblem at 12 o'clock, Tandorio text logo is crisp and high definition. Also, the dial isn't over branded with unnecessary text and specification, which is often the case with low tier Chinese brands. We simply have automatic and divers 200M at 6 o'clock. The font is good, it's fine, it's not too thick and blurry, it's high definition and crisp, but it just is noticeable the lack of the white minute ticks on the chapter ring, which is absent. It really should have that. The date complication is also small. I think they could enlarge the date window to improve the legibility of it, but the white date wheel does contrast very well with the black Arabic numerals, and both the singles and the double Arabic numerals are correctly aligned inside the white framed date window. They're not too far to the left or right, and they're not too high or too low, so the proportion of the date window is slightly small, but there isn't a dark shadow around it, so the legibility is good. Now, with regards to the handset, the orange contrasting minute hand is correctly proportioned. It looks wide enough and it also looks long enough. But however, I think the hour hand is undersized. It looks too small and too short. The second hand is the correct proportion, but I think they've made a mistake here, because they've made the minute hand and the second hand black. And the problem with a black hour hand and a black minute hand is it does not contrast very well with the black dial. They should have made the hour and minute hand white, or alternatively silver, as per the SKX007, which this is an homage to, because a silver handset would contrast better with a black dial, which is matte. The orange minute hand does contrast very well. So the problem with black is it just doesn't contrast with a black dial. they could easily rectify this by making the hand silver or white. That's something they could consider upgrading. I like the green tone of the C3 printed indices, and the proportions of the indices are good. It does look very similar to an SKX007 dial, which this is an homage to. With regards to the bezel, it's solid 316L grade stainless steel, coin edge finish to it, but it's matte blasted effect. Now, I think they've made a mistake with the finishing, because this is a clear cost-cutting measure. Rather than brush satin finishing the coin edge teeth, or alternatively mirror polishing, which is more expensive, it does add production time and therefore increases production cost per piece. They've just simply matte blasted it. And that really cuts production costs, because it's cheaper to matte bead blast the bezel rather than mirror polishing it or brush satin finishing it. But it just doesn't look as good, and also it doesn't match the finishing to the case, because on the top of the lugs we've got brush satin finishing, which has a beautiful luster, and on the flanks we have mirror polished flanks, which looks very similar to the SKX007 case. But on the rest of the piece there are no matte bead blasted surfaces to it, so really having a matte bead blasted coin edge bezel doesn't fit the finishing to the rest of the piece. For example, the case back and the head of the piece do not match. So they really need to brush satin finish the coin edge teeth, or alternatively mirror polish them as per an SKX007. That would look more aesthetically pleasing. The bezel insert is very well executed. It's ceramic rather than being aluminium as per the SKX007 or the 5KX, so it's harder and more scratch resistant. Nice glossy black finish to it, and it's engraved to a good standard with dots for the minute ticks, and then we've also got Arabic numerals which are engraved and inlaid with white paint to a good standard. The Lume pip and triangle are very well executed, and the Lume pip is fully lumed with C3 Superlume Nova. They've missed an opportunity here, because they could have used a fully lumed C3 Superlume Nova ceramic bezel insert, and it is possible to do that at this price point, because, for example, Steel Dive do it with the SD1953, which is a Submariner date homage. That has a fully loomed ceramic bezel insert with BGW9, and that is a less expensive piece. It's only €80, and it also comes on an oyster style bracelet. This only comes on a silicone rubber strap, and it's €92, but the ceramic bezel insert is just inlaid with white paint versus C3 Superlume Nova. They could fully loom the bezel at this price point. But having said that, the white paint contrasts very well with the ceramic, and the ceramic is well finished. It has a nice glossy finish to it with no imperfections. With regards to the crown, it's solid 316L grade stainless steel, coin edge finish to it, and again, this doesn't match the bezel because this is mirror polished. The coin edge teeth are mirror polished to a good standard, so one would expect the bezel to match, but of course it's not. It's matte bead blasted effect. So this is the problem. The crown should match the bezel, and it doesn't. We've got two different finishes to the coin edge teeth on the bezel and also the crown respectively. It really should have the same mirror polished coin edge teeth on the bezel as per the crown. Sterile crown, but I'm not going to be overly critical because this is a low tier price point piece at €92. One has to be realistic and expect some cost cutting measures, but it would look better with an engraved or embossed T Tandorio emblem. But having said that, the SKX007 and also the 5KX also have sterile crowns. They're not signed, so it is acceptable because this is an homage to it. So let's test the bezel execution. 120 click unidirectional bezel, as one would expect. Nice loud audible clicks. I like the sound, also like the feeling of the clicks. They feel even all the way through the 360 degrees. In terms of resistance, it has a firm resistance, firmer than a Seiko 5KX or a Seiko SKX007, which you may be familiar with. I like the firm feeling of it. Feels nice and even, doesn't get tighter or looser through the 360 degrees of rotation, which is good. No lateral side-to-side play whatsoever, no back play whatsoever, so it feels nice and tight. Let's just check the alignments. Nice loud audible clicks. I like the firm resistance. One more click. Perfect. So the Lume pip and triangle perfectly aligned with the centre of the 12 o'clock printed index on the dial. But of course we can't really check the alignment because there are no 60-minute ticks. There's no chaptering. That is absent. We just have a stainless steel rehort. This really does need a chaptering because it's meant to be an homage to the SKX007 and it's meant to be a 200-metre dive piece. But having said that, the alignment is correct. So no lateral side-to-side play, no back play, feels even through the 360 degrees and perfect alignment, bang on 12 o'clock. So this is excellent bezel execution. Tandorio deserve full credit for it. Nice and tight, no backplay, no QC issues whatsoever. So let's test the screw down crown execution. The screw down crown provides an effective hermetic seal to 200 meters. It has two rubber O-ring gaskets, one inside the stainless steel crown and a second rubber O-ring gasket inside the stainless steel crown tube. The two hermetic seals provide 200 meters of water resistance. Now, it does feel very stiff. It doesn't feel rough or gritty, but you have to really grip it with your index finger and thumb to get purchase on it, and you really have to give it lots of torsion in order to unscrew it. Now, it's difficult to get a grip of it as well because of the proportions of the crown guards at 4 o'clock. The crown is quite small, so it's quite difficult to get a grip of the coin edge teeth, but having said that, it does unscrew with a minimal number of turns. It does feel smooth, but it's not silky smooth. There is a lot of friction, and the friction is due to two reasons. The first reason is the poor interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. They could improve the tolerances of the machining when they machine the threads to make it looser. They feel slightly too tight, and you can feel the stainless steel rubbing against the stainless steel. The crown has a lot of friction rubbing against the thread on the stainless steel crown tube. The other reason for the friction, which is excessive, is the rubber O-ring gaskets, which compress as you screw down the crown onto the crown tube. You can feel the rubber O-ring gasket rubbing against the winding stem, which creates friction. You can also feel the second rubber O-ring gasket rubbing against the end of the crown tube as you unscrew it. And the cumulative effect of all that friction is it adds together and makes it a very stiff crown to unscrew. It does unscrew okay, but they could refine it. For example, the Steel Dive SD1953 has a silky smooth crown, and that is €80 in the low tier. This is €92, it's more expensive, so it is possible for low tier Chinese brands to get silky smooth crown execution at this price point or even less. So when it's fully unscrewed, we're now in the manual wind position. One can manually wind the Seiko NH35A automatic to its maximum 41-hour power reserve. Feels nice and smooth to manually wind. One can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up to its maximum 41 hours. Medium resistance to it, feels good and smooth, doesn't feel rough or gritty. Feels like a very smooth movement to manually wind. Pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set date complication. Just bear with me, it's difficult with gloves because it's a small crown. Right, so we're now in the quick set date complication setting position. Rotating the crown anti-clockwise advances the quick set date. If you look closely at the date window at 3 o'clock, you can see each day of the month clicks over with a nice positive click. Good solid indexing. I like the quick set complication of the NH35A. It feels robust and reliable. Good heavy clicks. It's something I really like about it, the good positive clicks of the date. So both the singles and the double Arabic numerals align correctly, as I've detailed. They are correctly proportioned, but I think they could have enlarged the date window because that would have improved the legibility. The date window looks slightly undersized for the size of the Arabic numerals, both the singles and the doubles on the dates wheel, but you can read them okay. So the font is good, it's nice and high definition and crisp, it's not thick and blurry, and I think if they just enlarged it slightly that would improve the legibility, but it is okay. Pulling it out to the second click position hacks the movement. So if you look at the second hand, you can see it's now stopped dead. Therefore, it's possible to set the time precisely to the second with the Seiko caliber NH35A. So we're now in the time setting position. Nice light resistance to the gearing, minimal friction, feels smooth both clockwise and anti-clockwise, minimal backplay. When you rotate the crown clockwise and anti-clockwise, there isn't an immediate response. You have to take up some very slight slack, and that's a characteristic of the NH35A you just have to live with, but it is acceptable. It's minimal backplay. The contrasting orange minute hand does contrast very well. I like that, but it's just a shame they've used the black hour hand and black minute hand because it's hard to read them. They do not contrast well against the black dial. But feels good to set the time. Pushing it back in's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. You can see the second hand begins to sweep around the dial once again at the characteristic 3 Hz of the caliber NH35A. So let's test screwing the crown back down. Instant thread pickup, but it is difficult to get purchase on it in between the crown guards at 4 o'clock because it does feel like a small crown, although the coin edge finishing is grippy and tactile. So it's just a small crown, but difficult to get a grip of, but once you do get purchase on it, it does pick up. The threads are very good. In terms of the interface, the internal thread of the stainless steel crown picks up very well with the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. Minimal number of turns required to fully screw it down and reinstate the 200 meters of hermetic seal. So it does screw down okay. It does feel smooth, but not silky smooth, but there is a lot of resistance. So you've really got to turn it with a lot of force, a lot of torsion to get it to screw down and unscrew. It's okay. There is room for improvement, but it's acceptable. One has to expect some QC issues at this price point of €92. Now, with regards to the silicone rubber strap, it's very soft and supple. More soft and supple than FKM fluoro rubber, or alternatively natural rubber. The negative of silicone rubber is that they have a tendency to split and crack around the spring bar with long-term usage, because silicone rubber is very soft and supple, but it's not as hard-wearing and durable long-term as FKM rubber, or alternatively natural rubber. One could consider it to be a cost-cutting measure, but the positive is it is very soft and supple. It doesn't require any breaking in as per an FKM fluoro rubber strap. The negative is it does attract a lot of lint. And as you can see, if you look at the matte textured finish to it, which has a waffle textured finish, it does tend to attract lint. Natural rubber straps and FKM rubber straps don't tend to attract lint as much, which is better. But that's the negative of silicone rubber straps. Slight taper to it, nice textured finish to the waffle profile to the exterior. It's just a shame it's got a sterile buckle and tang, but the two keepers are correctly proportioned and they both slide. So let's look at the underside, which is also textured. So underside of the strap, as you can see, has these cutouts in a grid formation, and that does allow for air circulation and allows for sweat and perspiration to wick away from the wrist. Or if you use the piece in water, which is its intended purpose as a dive piece, it does allow the water to wick away from the strap through the holes. Plenty of holes in the strap which act as perforations, so this will fit a 6-inch up to a maximum 8-inch wrist, plenty of holes to get the perfect fit. They could further enhance it if they use quick release stainless steel spring bars, which are absent. We've just got standard spring bars, so one does need a spring bar tool. But however, because it's silicone rubber, it's very soft and easy to compress the edge of the silicone rubber strap in order to remove it if you want to exchange it. So quality of the finishing is good, feels nice and smooth, but it does attract a lot of lint, which is a characteristic of silicone rubber straps. Natural rubber and FKM fluoro rubber straps do not attract so much lint, as you can see. Let's look at the case back. Solid 316L grade stainless steel. It's got a matte blasted effect to the centre section, which is sterile, and they could have reduced the thickness of it because that centre section, which is embossed, actually adds 1mm of thickness, which is unnecessary for a 200mm screw down case back. They could have made it sterile as per a Rolex or Tudor style case back. Does have a bubble back profile to it, which also does add some thickness, and I think they could reduce the case back by 1mm because this is a slightly thick piece at 13.4. Bearing in mind it is a small head of the piece, it's only 38mm. The circumference is engraved with the specification of the piece to a good standard, and the engraving is good. It doesn't feel sharp or rough against the wrist. The exterior circumference is also mirror polished to a good standard. The milled slots are deburred and chamfered to a good standard, but they could reduce the bubble back profile of it by 1mm. That centre section, which is embossed, is completely unnecessary, and it's just there for aesthetic reasons. It doesn't serve any purpose. This case back doesn't need that to clear the rotor on the NH358 automatic. This really is 1mm too thick. It could be reduced down to 12.4, for example, if they took 1mm off the case back and machined it with a sterile centre section rather than having this embossed centre. But it does feel comfortable against the wrist when wearing it for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. So I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Just bear with me, I'll get the end of the silicone rubber strap to engage with the buckle and tang. Now, on a positive note, I'm pleased to report that this does actually fit my 8-inch wrist, which is a pleasant surprise because you'll know from my previous reviews I have a large 8-inch wrist, and often it's the case with straps that come on pieces, they are a fraction too short. But I can engage the end of the strap in both of the keepers, which are sliding keepers, they're not fixed. So this strap will fit a minimum 6-inch wrist up to a maximum 8-inch wrist, and I can actually slide an index finger beneath the buckle and tang and strap at all times. So this is a comfortable fit. It's not a tight fit on my 8-inch wrist. Feels very soft and supple. Plenty of holes for 6 inches up to 8 inches. The taper on the strap is good for the 38mm head of the piece. Now, in terms of comfort level and feel good factor, this only weighs 85 grams, so it is a very comfortable piece. It feels invisible on wrist, it feels weightless on the silicone rubber strap. Doesn't feel top heavy, feels balanced, but slightly thick. And that is really not down to the thickness of the case, the sapphire crystal or the bezel. The thickness is due to the embossed centre section of the bubble back case back. As I've detailed, that adds 1mm of excess thickness, which is completely unnecessary. This isn't a 300 metre water resistant piece, it is 200 metres. It's a shame because they've missed an opportunity. The undercut to the flanks of the case has a nice curved profile, so it does wrap around the wrist very well for a compact case. But the bubble back case back means there's a gap underneath the undercut to the flanks and also the tips of the lugs. So they could reduce the case back by 1mm, and that would reduce the thickness of this piece down to 12.4, because at 13.4 it is 0.4mm above the sweet spot of 13mm to easily slip underneath a shirt cuff if you wear business shirts. It does feel rather tall and thick despite being compact. Now, it does have a short lug to lug measurement of only 41. 48 is the sweet spot for all wrist sizes. I often refer to it as the perfect lug to lug measurement, the sweet spot, because 48 will fit collectors regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist respectively. At 41, this is clearly intended to fit collectors with a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches. If you have a larger wrist of 7 to 8 inches plus, you may find that the 38mm head of the piece doesn't wear with enough wrist presence. For example, this is noticeably smaller on wrist than a Seiko 5KX or alternatively a Seiko SKX007, which have a 41mm case. Does have a similar case shape, but you can really tell that this is a 38mm, not a 41 5KX or SKX007 case. Nice curved profile to the lugs. I like the large mirror polished bevels. Quality of the brushed satin finishing to the tops of the lugs is good. Quality of the mirror polishing to the flanks and the bevels is also good. So visually, it does look very similar to a 5KX or an SKX007, but it is like a smaller version of it at only 38 by 41mm long. It's just a shame it's slightly too thick at 13.4. And also the bezel with its matte blasted effect doesn't look aesthetically pleasing. Had they brushed satin finished it or mirror polished it, as per the mirror polishing to the coin edge teeth on the crown, that would look better. Because the problem with the matte blasted effect to the bezel coin edge teeth, it makes the bezel look thicker than it actually is, and that compounds the fact this is slightly tall and thick at 13.4. The bezel does look slightly too thick. Again, they could reduce the thickness of the bezel by 1mm. That would also reduce this to only 12.4. So there's room for improvement with regards to the bezel proportions and also the case back proportions. Legibility also needs improving. The AR coating works well, but the negative of the black hour hand and the black minute hand is they don't contrast with the black dial very well. If this had a white handset or alternatively silver handset, as per the 5KX or the SKX007, the legibility of the hands, the contrast would be far better. The orange minute hand contrasts well, but the hour hand looks underproportioned, it's too small. The second hand also doesn't contrast because it's in black. So they really need to improve the handset proportions and also change it to silver or white. That would fix the problem. Also, the absence of the chaptering is noticeable. There are no minute ticks for the seconds or the minutes, and this is meant to be a dive piece. So, room for improvement. They should delete these stainless steel rehorts and add a black chaptering with white minute ticks. So comfort level is good, feel good factor is good, but clearly intended for a smaller wrist size of 6 to 7 inches. I don't think it has enough wrist presence to satisfy if you have a 7 to 8 inch wrist. It just feels a lot smaller than a Seiko 5KX or a Seiko SKX007 respectively. Right, so let's do a Lume test and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged. Now, initially, it looks good, but however, it's going to fade and fade fast. There's a good colour tone match in daylight with the C3 Super Lume Nova on the Lume pip on the ceramic bezel insert, the printed indices on the dial, and also the handset, even though they're under proportioned. In the dark, there's also a good colour tone match. The green tone of the C3 on the Lume pip, the printed indices and the handset all match. But however, you can see the exciter in the handset is glowing brighter than on the Lume pip and also the dial, because there are more layers of C3 Super Lume Nova applied. So the green looks slightly darker on the handset than on the dial and the Lume pip. The exciter isn't going to glow as brightly on the dial. It's going to fade and fade fast, as you'll see exponentially with time. It's going to fade quickly. So, unfortunately, Tandorio have used the cost-cutting measure of only applying 3 to 4 layers of C3 Super Lume Nova on the dial and the Lume pip. It looks like they've applied more layers, possibly 5 to 6 on the handset. The dial is now going to fade quickly and the Lume pip is going to fade quickly. So now you can already see there's a colour tone mismatch between the handset, the dial and the Lume pip. This is the kind of cost-cutting measure one has to expect at this price point, €92. One has to be realistic. We're not looking at a €200 price point piece. But however, some low-tier Chinese brands do not cut corners like this. For example, the Steel Dive SD1953, which I've previously reviewed, is a Submariner data Homage that uses 5 to 6 layers on the fully loomed ceramic bezel insert and also the dial and the hands. No cost cutting, and that is only an €80 price point piece on an oyster style bracelet. This is only on a silicone rubber strap, which is sterile. The buckle and tang is unsigned. It's not on a bracelet with a solid mill clasp. And therefore, there is no excuse for Tandorio using that extreme cost-cutting measure. It really needs 5 to 6 layers on the Lume pip, 5 to 6 layers on the dial, 5 to 6 layers on the handset. Now, you can see the negative of the hands being under proportioned. If you look at the minute hand and the hour hand, they're slightly undersized. They're too thin, and also the hour hand is too short. Also, they've only put a Lume pip on the second hand. They could have fully loomed it, for example. But really, the hands are very disappointing. They need to scale up the proportions, make them longer and larger, and therefore improve the legibility, because this is really poor quality on the hands. The legibility in the dark is not good. So room for improvement. It needs 5 to 6 layers, needs a larger handset. That would enhance it. Right, so let's discuss the movement used. You'll all be familiar with the Seiko NH35A Automatic, which is made in Malaysia. It has 24 joules, it runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. It has hand winding and hacking, which use all complications, and also a quick set date complication, which, as I've demonstrated, works well. 41-hour power reserve is perfectly acceptable. It's a reliable, well-proven workhorse movement. The stated accuracy is -20 to +40 seconds per day, so a rather wide accuracy range. However, I'm pleased to report that this one has been well regulated. It's running consistently at +8 seconds per day when fully wound to its maximum 41-hour power reserve. +8 is well within the stated accuracy of -20 to +40 per day. So they're doing a good job of regulating their movements. +8 is acceptable. It is possible to go even further and regulate an NH35A in 5 positions to ±5 seconds, for example, but +8 is good enough and it is acceptable at this price point. It is the correct choice of movement. It's reliable, well proven, no reliability issues reported whatsoever, builds quality, quality control, and tolerances of the movement are all good. And I like the NH35A. Feels good to manually wind, hacking works well, quick set date complication also works well. It's the right choice for this piece. So last, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So low tier piece, the price point is $97 US, which is €92. I'm going to declare it okay quality, and I'm going to declare it okay value. I can't say it's good quality or good value because the crown feels stiff. They really need to improve it to make it silky smooth, and that is inexpensive to do. It's not going to add production costs. As I've detailed, Steel Dive are capable of doing it on the SD1953 at €80. This is €92, and it does have a stiff crown. They also need to refine the case back because it's too thick with this centre embossed circle. It needs to be reduced by 1mm, and also the bezel finishing matte be blasted effect is a cost cutting measure too far. This should be brush satin finished or ideally mirror polished as per the mirror polished coin edge crown, and that would further enhance the piece. They could also reduce it by 1mm, and that would reduce this piece down to 12.4. It's slightly too thick at 13.4. Bearing in mind it's a small piece. It's 38mm by a compact 41 lug to lug. Also needs to have the buckle and tang signed with the Tandorio T emblem, or alternatively Tandorio text logo. This is another cost-cutting measure. So for these reasons, the cost-cutting measures, I think it's okay quality and okay value at €92. It's a good watch. The bezel execution is good, but the C3 Super Lume Nova needs an additional 1 to 2 layers applied to improve it. The handset needs to be scaled up, so it needs some refinement to make it good quality and good value, or excellent quality and excellent value at €92. It faces stiff competition from steel die, for example, with the SD1953 at €80. So I'm going to recommend it to you for your consideration. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Tandorio TD201. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you for watching.